Good morning. I am Madeleine Tacour, president of the Children's Movement of Florida, and really thrilled to welcome you all today to Bosses for Babies Live, a webinar series at the intersection of business and early childhood. The Children's Movement of Florida is the state's leading voice on early childhood. We champion policies and investments in high quality early learning opportunities, healthcare access, and parent support. We created Bosses for Babies to engage business leaders in boosting their workforce and contributing to community prosperity through family-focused practices, meeting business leaders where they are so that regardless of the company's size, available resources, or needs, they're able to affect meaningful change. Today, I get to spend the next 30 minutes or so with Kyle Baltuch. Welcome, Kyle. We'll talk about how the Florida Chamber is supporting business leaders to champion early childhood, to give back, and to maximize their impact. Before we begin and I introduce Kyle, let's review a few housekeeping items. We are using Zoom's live transcript today, so if you'd like to see closed captioning throughout the program, just click the CC Live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. We're also recording this webinar and broadcasting live on Facebook, so all of this material will be available after the fact. If you want to join the conversation, please visit our website at www.bossesforbabies.com. I'll also ask everyone to make use of the chat function. Why don't we have everyone introduce themselves there right now, tell us who you are, where you're watching from, and if you're joining us on Facebook this morning, let us know in the comments there too. We'll share your comments and questions with the panel, with Kyle as we go. For those of us in Zoom, please use the Q&A function for any questions you have. We'll do our best to answer them, but can't guarantee we'll get to everything. So let's get to it. Kyle Baltuch, Senior Vice President at the Florida Chamber Foundation. He is responsible for everything in the Equality of Opportunity Initiative. That's all about prosperity and helping to move more families in Florida out of poverty. It's the Business Alliance for Early Learning, and it is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I've had the pleasure of getting to know Kyle over the last year or so. I've been really impressed with his strong bias for action. He's at the Chamber working with their members every day to get things done. And what many of you may not know about Kyle is that he brings that impatience for action home too. He renovated his entire home watching YouTube videos. So Kyle, we will ask you another day whether you recommend that DIY route at home. But for today, we'll ask you to share a bit about how every business leader can do some more DIY on their local impact.
Sure.
So over to you. The Florida Chamber Foundation is known for being data-driven. What is the data that drove you to care about early childhood, which obviously brings you to this webinar today?
Yeah. So, to answer that question involves a little bit of historical context about the Florida Chamber, the Florida Chamber Foundation, and our specific focus within the foundation. So Florida Chamber Enterprise has been around for more than 100 years, but the Chamber Foundation itself has been around for a little more than the last 50. And the idea when the Florida Chamber Foundation was created was to be the thought leader and really the think tank for the enterprise holistically. If our team in the government affairs side for the Florida Chamber is going to go out and lobby and advocate for strong reform or for policy that is necessary to move Florida forward, well, what's the basis for that? This isn't an idea of a hired gun or lobbyist for action. This is an idea of where does Florida need to go and what are the policies we need to implement to get us there? And that's why the Florida Chamber Foundation was created, to be that think tank, to look over the next 2 to 10 years and decide where is Florida headed and what are the changes that are necessary to get Florida where we want it to be. And every 10 years or so, we do a large project. In the past, those projects have led to the creation of organizations like Career Source Florida and Enterprise Florida. And in 2015-16, Mark Wilson, our president and CEO, was sitting down with the time Speaker Will Weatherford. And they were sitting over dinner having really kind of a very broad, high-level conversation about, hey, it's getting about that time to look at where Florida Chamber Foundation is headed next, what's going to be our next major project. And this thought bubble kind of occurred. How do we grow to the 10th largest economy in the world? And at the time, they didn't really know where we sat. They knew we were in the top 20. But if Florida is going to be growing this economy, what does it look like? And how do you actually get to number 10? And that started what we called the 2030 Blueprint Path. And over 2 years at the time, I actually wasn't a member of the Florida Chamber staff, but I served as an economic advisor on the project in my previous life. And we built out over 2 years, invested a few $1 million into what we call the 2030 Blueprint. And it led to 39 different goals, on if they were accomplished, Florida could, in theory, be the 10th largest economy in the world. At the time, we were 18th. We made progress to 17th. And this past year, we are actually sitting at 15th. So if you took Florida and you compared it to countries like Mexico, and you compared it to countries like France, in the United States even, we would actually be sitting at the 15th largest economy by GDP in the world. During that project, we looked through our 6 pillars, which span from everything from education to business and governance to civic engagement to quality of life. And we created 6 goals in the education pillar. And 2 of them kind of live in that early childhood space: kindergarten readiness as an outcome and 3rd grade reading as an outcome. And the reason we were driven to this was to understand, if we want to build the 10th largest economy in the world, we have to have the employees, we have to have the talent to get there. And if you are focused on talent on the back end, if you're starting to look at, hey, high school graduation's coming around, do we get these children to tech colleges? Do we get them to 4-year universities? Do we get them to 2-year schools? Do we get them a certificate program? Well, we've missed the mark. We may not get our children to high school graduation if we don't focus on those early stages. And so the data drove us to pay attention to what is happening from day one. What happens the day that child is born? What does their education, and more importantly, their opportunities look like from day one? And how do we work as a business community to ensure they have the opportunities to succeed? We talk all the time, and I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent real quick. We talk all the time about earned success, but the Florida Chamber Foundation has, understood earned success is important, but not everybody has that equal opportunity to earn their success. It's that bootstraps argument. People say, hey, we'll just pull up your bootstraps and get to work. Well, if you don't have boots, it makes it really difficult to pull up those bootstraps. So, the idea, again, a long-winded way to say the idea was to understand what drives Florida's economy. Education is vitally important. And if we're not focused from day one, we're going to be missing the mark.
Awesome. So I know that when you talk about those 3rd grade reading scores and kindergarten readiness scores, that's some of the data that you're tracking. And as you described it, you understand that starts before even a pre-K classroom.
Absolutely.
The Florida Gap Map is part of this data-driven approach. Tell us more about that tool, what it is, why the Chamber created it, and
yeah, sure. So if you don't mind, I'll share my screen real quick and kind of walk through. We have 2 different functions here. We have the Florida Scorecard and Florida Gap Map, and I'll show them both here. So again, I mentioned 39 goals, and we actually track all of these goals that we look at on this data platform that we host called the floridascorecard.org. And anybody can find the floridascorecard.org. I'm sure there'll be a link to it in the chat. But again, let me kind of show it at a quick high level. If there's any in-depth questions, feel free to email me or give me a call. I'm happy to go over it. If the number is in red, it's trending in the wrong direction, either month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year, however often that data is published. If it's green, it's trending in the right direction. And if you see a number in blue or in gray, it likely signifies a goal or a metric we're trying to get to by 2030. And this is kind of our main page. Let me jump to the talent supply and education page. As I mentioned, we're tracking everything from kindergarten readiness all the way up to educational attainment. And this is for the state of Florida. We can see that 57% of our kindergartners are ready for kindergarten. Now, I always say data is important, analysis is crucial. If you don't look at analysis, if you don't dive into the analysis, then data is only one piece of the puzzle. You see our number is green, and that would say, hey, over the last year, we're actually trending in the right direction. And that's sort of true. Kindergarten readiness scores actually went up during COVID. What's important to understand is our amount of test takers went down dramatically. And what we've been saying here is people have just delayed the start of kindergarten, especially during those peak months of COVID where there was so much uncertainty and people were staying home, or there were parents who didn't have their ability to track their children for virtual learning if they had to be in school. So we went from about 180,000 test takers to about 130,000 test takers. We actually lost about 60,000, maybe down to about 120. Kindergarten readiness, we didn't lose as many test takers, but we did drop a little bit down to 54%. And again, you can see these metrics all the way up to AA and bachelor's degrees. We can also look at these metrics at the county level, because again, when you're trying to attack a problem like this, you have to understand the challenge at a state level, but you have to understand what it looks like in your community. And that's where we created the Florida Scorecard at a county level. So I picked Broward County, one of our largest counties here in Florida. You see kindergarten readiness is actually improved over the state level. It's at 66%, and that's not surprising. Very strong early learning coalition. Madeline, your team's down there. I know you guys are doing statewide work, but it probably doesn't hurt to have good partnerships in that community as well. And what we've seen in areas like Miami-Dade and Broward, we've actually seen improvement over state scores for quite a long time. Understanding, again, if you want to affect change, it happens at the local level. We created what we call the Florida Gap Map. And this tracks two numbers right now down to the zip code level and down to the school level. So I have Leon County here in front of me. And if we look at a community like 32304, we see there are 1,731 children in poverty. That's 48.6% of all children. And these little dots are actually third grade classrooms. So John G. Riley Elementary is a public school here in Tallahassee. And they're in third grade. 19% of third graders are reading at grade level, and approximately 73 children are not. And we can see how this changes just by a small geographic distance. A couple miles north, you get to 32312, and that number goes from nearly 48% to 7%. Those reading scores go from 19% to schools that are seeing reading scores like 83 and 78%. And so what this allows us to do is hone in on specifically where some of these challenges are at a more micro level. And this allows us to work with the business community, work with policymakers, or work with the nonprofit community to hopefully target some of those resources that are needed to the areas where they're needed the most.
Awesome. So I might ask you to share your screen one more time. We've already covered that both you and the chamber have this strong bias for action. I saw Susan Toller commenting in the chat, so I will pretend that she is talking to a local small business owner in Duval County. How can that small business owner use the gap map if they want to make a difference?
So let me pull up Duval County and I can show you, and I'll actually share some real world examples of how some of our partners are doing this. At the zip code level, at the county level, and even at the school level through our projects, we have partners. We have county champions, we have zip code champions, and we have school partners. And these are businesses or entities that are focused on making a difference in their community. And right now, the best way to use the gap map to do so is understanding, one, there is a challenge within your community or within your office's community. Or maybe you live in one of those lighter communities, and by lighter, I mean it's a heat map, so you can see the lighter areas have less poverty, the darker areas have more poverty, but next door might not be the case. And what you can use the gap map for is understanding where you need to target those resources. So I actually met this week with the United Way of Okaloosa, or it might have a different name, but they're from Okaloosa and it's United Way. And she said they just got a grant from Grubhub or DoorDash, one of the two. And it's actually to supply meals to those in need in their community. And she said the first thing we did was we looked at the gap map and found, all right, what are the most impoverished zip codes in our community? And then on top of that, she said, we started looking at some of the schools. Where are the most challenged schools? Understanding that what happens in the school is certainly a part of it, but what happens outside the classroom is also just as important. And sometimes the difference between performing at a high level in the classroom or not, whether it's in kindergarten or third grade, can be the difference between getting a meal at home or not. And that's how they're targeting where they're going to be using those funds. So if you were in Duval County, like I know Ms. Susan Toller is and is doing incredible work with Florida Blue, shout out Susan Toller. She's the chair of not only the Florida Chamber Foundation, but a partner on my Prosperity Project and the Business Alliance for Early Learning. So
and a member of our board at the Children's Movement, hence the Worlds Colliding comment.
Big fan of Susan. Yeah, I'm going to try to claim to like her more, but everybody likes Susan. She's wonderful. But anyway, if you were in, say, a community like 32206, you would see that poverty is a significant challenge. 50% of all children are at federal poverty or less. And just for some context, federal poverty is about 21,000 for a family of three. So we're talking pretty significant challenges these families are facing. And if you were looking at a school like Brentwood Elementary, you would see only 9% of third graders are reading at grade level. 41 children are not. And so you could start to contextualize the challenge. Hey, at Brentwood Elementary, if we're going to do a volunteer program, maybe we should do some volunteering at a school like Brentwood. Or if we're going to do a meals program, maybe we should look at the families on Brentwood. Or maybe you're a partner with a Boys and Girls Club or a YMCA that's in this community. And it might be valuable to say, hey, we're going to go to Brentwood and we're going to sponsor 41 children from third grade classrooms to do before or after school care there. Understanding that, again, that 13% of the time they spend in school for their entire year is important, but the 87% of time is really important as well. And maybe they have a parent, like maybe they're like me. I grew up in a single parent household. My mom worked 12-hour shifts. So that meant after school, nobody was there to read to me. This is not a woe is me story. I had a superhero with mom. But a lot of these individuals, these parents are superheroes themselves, but they don't have time to read to their children when they get home, or they're not there to read to their children. So maybe you want to sponsor an after school program in that community. That's kind of how you can use the gap map effectively right now. Is look, we have this idea of resources. We know how we want to commit them. Maybe the gap map can help us understand where they would go to best use. Because we already know the
Right.
business community does dramatic amount of work within their communities right now. But if we could target those resources on the where, that would be extraordinarily helpful.
That's great. I mean, I know that when you show this map, you're showing third grade reading scores, but when you were on the scorecard, you showed also kindergarten readiness. And what we know is that those numbers track pretty well together. And I know, with your work on the Business Alliance for Early Learning as well, we know it's not just in those elementary schools and those after school programs, but also the early learning programs that are in that area. And so I know our message to businesses has always been start before elementary school if you can.
That's exactly right. The reality is if we start at third grade, it's good, but it's too late. We're never going to get there on third grade reading starting in third grade. We actually did an interesting analysis, and maybe we'll make this public one day. We'll go a little further, but it was just myself and Dr. Herman Knopf kind of interested in some work in Sarasota. And Dr. Herman Knopf is one of the leading experts on early learning out of the University of Florida. And him and I looked at, with Maya Schreiber there, I wouldn't want to leave out Maya, she's fantastic as well, looked at third grade reading and kindergarten readiness and its correlation amongst feeder patterns. And again, not surprisingly, those schools that had challenges with kindergarten readiness also had challenges with third grade reading. In some of our pieces of data behind the shelf, we can also look at third or pre-third grade, the percentage of 3 and 4-year-olds enrolled in school. And in fact, I'm actually happy to bring up a little map right now, if you guys don't mind. I talked about some of those communities in 32304 earlier. Let me just show this piece of information. So remember in 32304, John G. Riley faced 19% of third graders reading at grade level. And about a mile north, we saw that those numbers were at 83 and 78%. We can go a little deeper, and we do this sometimes. And this is kind of just a chart here that explains a few different factors between those two communities. But let's hone in right here on the percentage of 3 and 4-year-olds enrolled in school. We see a 20% delta there. That's significant. Now, again, both of these percentages are actually pretty high when you compare it to the overall state of Florida, but you start to see that there's a reason there's improvements in reading in areas like 32312. They're having greater opportunities, not only down the entire life cycle here, but when it comes to their enrollment in 3 and 4-year-olds. So the earlier you can get students enrolled, or the more work you can do on the back end to help train these individuals from 0 to 5 is important. We know the data right now says that it's important. This isn't something we have to argue. 80% of your brain development is done by 3, 90% by age 5. It's dramatic.
Right.
And PNC, through some of the work they've done in Grow Up Great and in other areas, they've actually shown me some of the brain scans. And you can see the difference in a brain scan between a child who grew up in a stimulated environment, who had opportunities to succeed, and those who maybe grew up not in an environment where they were being neglected, but where they may not have had the opportunity. And their brains are legitimately different, physically different. So we're not playing some hypothesis game anymore. This isn't a theoretical question. The question now comes down to what can we do as a community and how can we work together to get this work done? I see Ms. Okrent in the chat, one of my favorite people down South Florida as well.
Yes, so this is really interesting and important. And you mentioned Sarasota. They have in that community the first 1,000 days Suncoast.
Yes.
You've shown us the data on 3 and 4-year-olds in school, but there are many people around the state who will say, you talked about the brain development before age 3. We need to start earlier. And I think it is difficult sometimes for business leaders to think about how to engage in the 0 to 5 space. And it's not always in the schools. Like all of these businesses are also employers. Like, how do you think about that? How do you recommend businesses get involved, get engaged in the 0 to 5 space?
No, you're absolutely right. I serve on a national leadership panel for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and it's the number one challenge we hear of state chambers all over the place. Hey, businesses want to engage. They don't know how to do so because there's not a very clear structure, again, in that 0 to 5 space. And the retort I typically have is, well, what are you doing as a business? Again, yeah, you may not have that direct line to a school or a chain of 0 to 5 schools, but you are business leaders yourself. You have an idea of whose parents in your organization. What are you doing to support them? And we've seen some businesses do this really, really well. If you look at an organization like PGT, which is in Venice, we're sticking in Southwest Florida, my community down there where I'm from originally, they have an amazing program where they actually do childcare for their employees on site. We've seen the same thing occur out of state at a place like Electric Boat Company in Connecticut. And they actually had a really interesting accidental case study. They started their childcare and early learning program on site right before the COVID pandemic. Obviously, they didn't predict this. This isn't something that they were aiming to do. And as a manufacturer, they didn't close down during the pandemic as long as many others did. The manufacturing industry really stayed up and running for the most part. What they found compared to their manufacturing colleagues was really interesting. They lost significantly less employees over that time. In fact, their turnover was down over non-pandemic times. When during the pandemic, we saw so many people leaving their jobs. And one of the top reasons they did surveys afterwards, they found out, well, one, not only do we really appreciate this fringe benefit, but it makes it such a decision maker when we're looking at, do we want to stay or do we want to leave? You know, that continuing relationship for that child, being in one school, having that teacher that they like, or having that child care facility that they like, or having the opportunity to continue their growth was so important to them that the value was much greater than that of a pay raise. And look, those are important, but there's other pieces as well. You know, quality PTO training, flexible schedules, a culture and environment where you really appreciate and understand what it looks like to be a parent. I think we all learned during COVID, we're having this Zoom right now, that some jobs you have to be on site to do, but maybe not all the time. And some jobs, maybe you don't need to be there. So if somebody needs to pick up their child at 2 and you can create a flexible schedule around that person's responsibilities, do so. There's a huge value in being able to hold on to that employee and not having to train new employees. And guess what? Those employees end up working harder for you as well because they appreciate being a part of that culture. Fascinating statistic, and this is something you and I talked about just last week when we were catching up, Madeline. The latest data from the census, and this is not old census data, this is actually from a 2-week span at the end of December to the beginning of January. It was released on January 19th. Shows that 340,999 Floridians during that 2-week span were out of work and not receiving pay because they were watching a child that was either not in daycare or in school. And again, that hurts economic activity, that hurts that organization, and it hurts that child. Now, look, not every single one of those individuals is, lining up for unemployment or is, in a poverty-stricken situation. Some of those are parents that have just decided, hey, we're a 2-income household and it's more affordable for me to just stay at home instead of go to work. But it does kind of underscore the point that if you don't have access to quality childcare or you don't have a flexible work schedule, it doesn't necessarily just hurt that child or that family. It can hurt the overall economy. We're sitting here right now with 550,000 open jobs, and we're looking for those employees every day. Some of them are out there wanting to work. They just don't have the ability to do so for one reason or another, and access to childcare can be one of them.
Absolutely.
And high quality childcare, not just childcare.
Absolutely. I mean, those numbers are pretty stark. And when you describe all of those benefits and you say some people don't have to show up to work all the time, I mean, there are also those who do, and things that those employers can do with
Absolutely.
Advanced scheduling. And I think that's your point is,
Yes,
exactly. There is something that every business can look at internally. You look at the needs of your employees and you can make changes. And I absolutely agree with you on those internal changes. Is there something else you wanted to add?
No, I was just going to underscore, you were exactly right. I mean, a company like Citrix I was talking to just the other day, I mean, they have great programs where, again, it's part of their fringe benefit. If you need to be on campus, they don't necessarily have a childcare on campus, but they help defer some of the costs of childcare offsite campus. They work on advanced scheduling to make sure, hey, do you have consistent scheduling conflicts that you're going to have over and over again? All right, well, maybe let's not plan your important meetings around that. Some of these are really intricate systems that businesses set up, but some are just based around compassion and dare I say, common sense. It can be difficult to do within your organization, but once you get that flow going, I think you find that that value is there. Your employees are happier. Their work product is better. And a lot of it comes from the fact that that employee understands you don't just care about them as an employee, you actually care about them as a human and as a family.
Absolutely. As you've just described it, it's sort of the right thing to do. But
Right.
in our view, it's also when working parents are supported, employers reap those benefits of increased loyalty, productivity, decreased turnover costs. So it is actually a win-win, allowing businesses to attract and retain the best talent and see those results in the bottom line.
Without a
So
doubt.
awesome. Anything else? We're running short on time here.
Sure.
Your wonderful friend Ellen Okren did comment in the chat. Just wanted to say that some of the children, don't necessarily attend school or a childcare center in the area that they live. That often there are
Exactly right.
centers in the industrial centers that are serving those families. And so I don't know if that's something that the Gap Map contemplates, or if that's just something that you might want to share with
Yeah.
businesses. But I want to give you a chance to comment on that.
So it's something that Herman and I looked at when you're looking at childcare geographic location. A lot of people sit there and go, all right, well, where's your house and what's a circle around your house? That circle actually doesn't make any sense at all. If you live here, your job is here, and the work and the childcare facility is here. That's not on your way to work. Your work can be 20 miles this way. The childcare center can be 5 miles this way, and this isn't where you're going to put your kid. So understanding those feeder patterns are important, not only between kindergarten and where they're going for third grade, but understanding where they are in terms of where that individual works. So and I'm not going to tease it completely here, but over the next year, I think we're looking at expanding how we look at data. Not just the really interesting awareness information like where are these centers of poverty and where are these third grade reading scores at the local level and at the school level, but what do commute times look like within those communities? Where are these individuals commuting to? Where are the child care centers based on that commute? Is this something that's convenient? Do they have the opportunity to commute to work, or are they using public transportation? If they're using public transportation, what is the accessibility there? Again, we can see that the reason somebody might not make it to their doctor's appointment, a child may not make it to their doctor's appointment, could be because their parent doesn't have a vehicle and they are on Medicaid and they don't have access to a federally qualified health facility. So if you don't have a federally qualified health facility in your community or an area where you can use Medicaid, you don't have a private vehicle and you're relying on bus routes, that parent can't come pick you up during the day, take you to that doctor's appointment and get back to work. And that might manifest itself with a child having an undiagnosed disability for a long period of time. Again, it's that same idea when we're looking at childcare centers. If you don't have access to a high quality childcare center on your route, you may not end up at the area you need to be. So there's more than just having it open and available. Is it accessible? And accessibility
Right.
means a lot of different things.
Well, Kyle, what you've just demonstrated is why your role at the chamber is so broad. The overlap between the business alliance, between the prosperity and the diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So unfortunately, time flies and we are
It
out of
really
time. We
does.
always promise to get people out on time. Just another shout out to Susan Toller, who's sharing in the chat a call to action for businesses. Get to know the childcare centers near your business, and is there something you can do there? Um, so we do want to get you all out on time. I'll share just one quick pitch on Bosses for Babies. We know the workforce is demanding increasing flexibility, purpose, and impact from their lives and their jobs. And Bosses for Babies is really working to build that network of Florida business leaders who champion family-focused practices in their communities, focusing just like Kyle was talking about on company culture, on leading by example. And these bosses are active across at least one of our three pillars, supporting their employees, advocating, and giving back. If this sounds like you, or you'd like to refer local businesses to the initiative, please click the link in the chat to learn more. And just in closing, before I thank Kyle here, we're beginning week 6 of Florida's 9-week legislative session. So over the next few weeks, our state senators and representatives are making policy and funding decisions affecting all aspects of life in Florida, of course, including early childhood. So stay tuned on our mailing list for updates on that, headlines to watch. And when you do that, we'll also keep you posted on Bosses for Babies and our partnership with the Florida Chamber, because the children's movement is proud to lead that goal of 100% of children ready for kindergarten by 2030. So Kyle, what a treat to be with you, talking about action, talking about data, and talking about what we can do. We appreciate you so much, and thank you for being with us today.
No, look, thank you. And thank you for your entire team's leadership. At the end of the day, we're not going to get it done unless we're working together. So I appreciate you guys.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.